At this point in our lesson, we are ready to document the subject matter used in a handful of Romero Britto's paintings. We've spent a fair amount of time analyzing his work, and it should feel very familiar to you at this point. You've spent time looking at and identifying the colors used. You've documented pattern and how that impacts the work. And now we're going to look at how the choice of subject matter impacts the artwork as a whole. So how the subject matter, the pattern, and the color all work together to create a mood or feeling within the painting. So, in order to document subject matter, you need to know what it is. So subject matter is essentially the focus or main idea of a work of art, or what the artist is choosing to represent in their artwork. Okay, so let's talk about setting this up, and then we'll get into some examples, and we'll go through an example together, and we'll even go through the painting process and kind of what I'm expecting for this assignment. So the first thing I did is I set my page up with 5 boxes. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on documenting subject matter from 5 pieces that I shared with you in your Google slide presentation on Romero Britto. So once again, I used those handy dandy blocks that lay around my house, and I used them as a pattern to create my boxes. Okay, it's up to you how you lay them out. It doesn't have to be identical to mine, but what you do need to have are 5 boxes in which to draw. Now, I would not recommend tiny boxes, so I wouldn't go any smaller than this because you want to have enough space to actually draw the subject matter. Lay it out in pencil, do it lightly so that if you need to adjust it, you can without having to throw the page out or without having to start on an entirely new page. Once you have that laid out and you've got your 5 boxes and you're ready to move on, I want you to add the heading subject matter. And again, you don't have to put it in the same place as me. If you want to, that's fine. If you want to lay your boxes out and your title out differently, that's perfectly fine with me. I have no problem with you doing that. So as you've probably noticed, I used a combination of stencils here to write out subject matter. So once again, found those handy dandy stencils laying around the house and put them to good use. Again, if you don't have stencils at home, that's no big deal. You can do regular handwriting, you can do block letters, bubble letters, anything that you would like to do to write it out. You can even use regular handwriting, but see if you can do something special to it to draw a little bit of attention to the word, okay? So, once we have everything laid out, the next thing we have to do is start documenting and identifying the subject matter in Romero Britto's work. So the identifying is going to come first. We're going to identify what we see, and then we're going to document it through drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and do an example for you. As I was looking through the examples I provided for you, I noticed that Romero Britto often includes close-ups of female faces. So in this project, for my first one that I'm going to draw, I am going to draw the subject matter as I see it and interpret it in Romero Britto's artwork. Okay, so in order to draw, obviously you're going to need a pencil and an eraser. Doesn't matter which box you start in, I'm just going to pick to start in this one. Now, as you're thinking about drawing your subject matter, I want you to think about really filling this space. Because again, when we think about Romero Britto's artwork, the subject matter, or what the painting's about, the focus of the painting, is often pretty large and fills the majority of the space. So I'll walk you through drawing this one and you can follow along with me. I'm going to pause this for a second so that I can move in closer to the square I'm going to be working in. Okay, so you should have a better close-up of the square I'm working in, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So for this girl that I'm going to draw, I'm going to start in about the center of the box, and I am going to essentially draw a square or rectangular shape. So putting in two sides, running vertically. Okay, so if we think about it, we finished that, it would look something like this, okay? Just like we did on the cat drawing that we practiced in our warm-up last week, we're gonna come in and we're gonna add a point onto this. So if you think about the center and we come down, we're essentially creating the chin on the girl by creating a triangle. You can think of it as almost like an upside down house. And one of the things I love about Romero Britto's work, and that one of your classmates mentioned when we were discussing Romero Britto's work, is that Romero Britto uses some very simple lines and shapes to create these really beautiful paintings. So here we have the rectangular square, we have the upside down triangle, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to kind of lay out the different pieces of the face. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to draw on the mouth. So the mouth, we have this kind of guideline here. The lip is going to be, the bottom lip's going to be about down here. And we're just going to bring it up in a smile. Just a little bit up above that line. And I'm going to go ahead in and draw in that top lip. Very simple shape. Okay? From there, I am going to put a line in that starts at the bottom of the chin, comes up right here through the top of the lip. I'm going to stop and I'm going to draw on essentially an upside down J. So we're coming up and we're drawing the hook, like an upside down J. We're going to bring this over. Gentle curve up and out. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is I am going to put in the lines for the eyes. And again, very similar to what we did on the cat. It's just going to be a single curve. Like that. Okay? Once you have that in, we're going to go ahead and draw in a rectangular shape, going over to the side, and we're not going to see the end of that one. We come over here, we're going to start the eyebrow above here, and this one's going to end in a triangular shape. So it's going to curve and come back over. So they're shaped a little bit differently. Okay. I am going to go ahead and use my eraser to pull out this line and this line. So that guideline we had in before. I'm going to go ahead into my artwork and I'm going to draw in the curve of the mouth. Okay. I'm then going to draw in a heart on this cheek. We see hearts a lot in Romero Britto's artwork. And then I'm going to draw in a swirl, which we often see used in his patterns, kind of like a circle swirl. And the head is essentially laid out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking for identifiable shapes as I begin to put the hair in. So I'm going to draw a curve which comes down gently. And these don't have to be perfect, guys. Curve down, over, and continuing off to the side of the square. From here, I'm going to come up and draw a curved triangular shape. So I'm going to curve this out and this is going to be curved down here. Okay, we're going to come in from here again, from this side, and we're going to draw another curved shape down. All right, then I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to bring this down like this. All right, so at this point, I think it's important for me to add the neck. So I'm going to look for the space basically where the lip ends, somewhere between the end of the lip and the beginning of the heart, to draw in the neck. Same thing here, the end of the lip and where the swirl is, and I'm going to come down from there and draw the curve of the neck. Okay, I'm going to continue this line over to the neck. From here, I'm going to put in a line that curves down up and gets more narrow as it reaches towards the edge of the box. Okay, we're going to come up and we're going to draw in another section of hair. Let's go ahead and put in a few more of these sections. We're going to do one starting here, and it's going to come over the end of the eyebrow and out to the edge. Okay, so it's not identical to his, but it definitely is capturing the same feeling and many of the same elements to his. And then I'm going to add on a curved line here, and I'm going to draw in some shoulders. Okay, once I have that done, what I'm going to do is go ahead and break the background up with just a few lines, just to get us in the habit of thinking about how that background's broken up. Now, when we paint this in, we're not going to be putting in patterns here. This is a small area and it'd be a little bit difficult to put in. So we're really just going to focus on representing colors and line in this piece. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to break this up into probably 3 pieces. So I'm just going to do a sketch of a line there, and then maybe there'll be another line here, and maybe a line here. Okay, maybe one here. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it, I think. Move this one out a little bit. To about there. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, and this is optional, if you have a fine point black Sharpie, you can follow along with me. I'm going to go ahead and outline this, clean up my pencil lines, maybe add in a few details, and then I'm going to go ahead and come back and paint it in. Okay, so now that we've drawn this out, we want to paint in the subject matter we've documented. So I've drawn my girl, she's been outlined with fine point Sharpie. If you don't have fine point Sharpie, you could use black colored pencil. You want to avoid anything that would potentially smear when mixed with watercolor. So black colored pencil is a safe choice if you don't have a black Sharpie. So once you are ready to paint, you want to make sure that you have a variety of brushes if possible. Definitely working with medium to small size brushes because this is a smaller area. Have your watercolors, some water, some tissues nearby in case of an accident or a spill, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and start with my background first. And as I'm painting, you can go ahead and follow along with the colors I'm using, or you may make your own choices. And that's completely fine to do. But if you are making your own choices, I still want you to be thinking about the colors that are appropriate to use and work that represents Romero Britto style. So I wouldn't be using, you know, maybe, let's say I wouldn't be using a lot of really dark colors altogether because his work is very bright and vibrant. So if you're not following along with the colors, make sure that the colors you are using are colors that we would definitely see in his artwork, because we're trying to capture and document the style and mood of the subject matter in his work. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with that background, and I'm gonna use that color, that really lovely yellow-orange color that I referred to as kumquat in my visual journal. I'm gonna go ahead and start with that. And because I don't want to get this on the other parts of my visual journal, I'm just gonna lift this up. I'll show you when this is done what I would normally have done if I'd been thinking about this and wasn't making a video. And when I need a smaller brush stroke, if I hold my brush more upright and lower down on the handle, I can have more control and create a much smaller line, less thick line, much thinner. So I go more slowly around those edges, and then I can speed up a little bit more in the bigger areas that I'm painting. Okay, so if you don't want to sit here and hold your book up, what you can do is very simple. Is you take your book and you lay it so that this page is the only page on the surface you're working on, and all their pages are off to this side. Okay? All right, so remember, we don't want to paint the piece directly beside it, because if we do, there's potential for those two colors to run together. So I'm gonna skip this space for now, and I'm gonna come over here, and I'm also going to be painting this space in using that nice yellow-orange that I created. Okay, so I'm thinking this is gonna be yellow, my yellow-orange, yellow, yellow-orange, yellow, so I'm gonna do this one yellow-orange as well. But again, if you wanna do different colors, I'm fine with that. Just make sure that they make sense and that they're colors that we would see in Romero Britto's artwork. Okay. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and mix up a color to use in part of the face. So when we look at Romero Britto's artwork and we look at the style he uses, the faces are often divided, and he'll use one color on one side and another color on the other. So I'm not gonna paint this entire face the same color. I'm also not gonna be using the same color in the neck. So I have to plan in advance what colors I wanna use. So I know that for part of it, I would like to use pink. So I'm gonna go ahead in and I'm going to do this side pink. And it's not touching any watercolors, so I can go ahead in and paint that now. So So now I'm gonna pick the next piece of the face to work on. I actually think I'm gonna let the face dry. So let's move on to maybe a section in the hair. So I think for this hair, I'm gonna be using blues and maybe a little bit of black. We'll see. Okay, because I'm not 100% sure if this is dry yet, this section here that I'm pointing to, I'm going to go ahead and pick a piece of hair that shouldn't be touching anything that could potentially be wet. So if I did this one, this is wet, they might run together. So I'm gonna go ahead and work in while that's drying, I'm gonna think about what else I could potentially paint that isn't touching anything that's wet. So probably I could come in here safely and paint. So I'm gonna go ahead in with that same color of blue. Remember to take your time on your watercolor paintings. Be thoughtful. Don't rush through them. If you're more patient, you're more likely to end up with a better result and without bleed. If you're running low on time, one thing you could do to speed up the painting process is, if you have permission, you could take a hairdryer on a very low speed and low heat and hold it up above and very gently blow dry that area that you're waiting to dry. But what I do is, like I said, I typically jump around to different areas in my painting to try and make the most of my time without rushing. So let's go through and kind of think about if there's anywhere else I can paint at this point that would be dry and, or I should say, isn't touching anything that's wet or is touching something that is likely dry. So I'm gonna go ahead, I think, and paint this in yellow now. This should be dry. I'm gonna touch it, make sure your finger's clean. Just kind of feel it. Feels pretty dry. I'm gonna go ahead in with my yellow and paint that section in yellow. And then if that section's dry, again, I'm using a clean finger. It looks like most of this has dried. So I can go ahead in with my yellow now. Really cleaning my brush out really well, doing a figure 8 on the bottom of my water container, checking on a tissue to make sure I'm not getting any color in there that would ruin my yellow. So I think what I'm gonna do now is go ahead and try and paint in the other half of the face. Probably mix a little bit of yellow and brown for my color. So my brown is a little darker than I wanted it to be. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and let that dry and figure out if there's anything else I can paint, which I think I can come over here and paint this in at this point. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and use a darker brown. Remember, I mixed yellow into my other one. So I'm gonna use the darker brown for the neck. Okay, let's see what else we can go ahead and paint in. So you used a little bit of dark blue in these sections. I'm gonna go back in with my light blue over here. This dries over here, I'll probably go back in with that same light blue right up there. So I have the eyebrows and the mouth to finish, so I'm getting really close to being done. I think for one eyebrow, I'm gonna use dark black, really dark blue maybe. And then I think I'm gonna use dark brown again for the other eyebrow. I'm gonna leave this little dot white. And when we're painting with watercolors, and we don't typically have white in watercolors, so what we do if we want to have something white in our painting is we just leave the paper showing through. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this up, and this little bit here, and we'll be all done. So this might take me a minute because I'm gonna do something special for the lips. So we'll be back in just a second to do that. I'm gonna finish this last piece and then we'll go ahead on with those lips. Okay, for my last and final detail, I am gonna go ahead and add a little bit of glitter to this piece. Now, if you don't have glitter, you can go ahead and just use regular paint. I'm gonna use red glitter for this. And again, if you don't have glitter, it's not a big deal. It's not required. So I have my scrap paper underneath. I went over this in the bonus video. And I've got my glue. I'm gonna grab a tiny brush that's clean. And I'm gonna need the tiniest amount of glue ever. So I have another scrap paper here. You can see I use it to just test out colors before I put them in a painting. I'm gonna put a drop about that big on a scrap paper. And what I'm gonna do is use my brush to pick up that glue and paint it into the lips. I'm trying to leave the black lines showing. Hopefully I'll be successful with that. You do want to make sure that the watercolors are dry before you do this. If you try and shake it off over a wet watercolor, the glitter will stick in that area. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and very carefully just put it on that area for the most part. Okay. And then I'm just gonna pick this up, tap it off onto my scrap paper. I see maybe 1 or 2 spots where I might like a little bit more glitter, so I might just repeat the process with a few dots of glue. And I'm just being really picky here because that looks pretty much fine, but I want a little bit more glitter here and right here. So let's see if I can get a little more glue on there. And then I'll just repeat that process and it'll be done, and I'll let it dry. So I'm not going to close this book up, because if I do, and the glue isn't dry, then obviously my pages will get glued together, and I don't want that. I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle that on there again. Let it sit for a second. Tap it back off onto my scrap paper. Just a few gentle taps. And yeah, I'm happier with that. So that's an example one for you. That did take me quite a bit of time to do. That took me about 50 minutes. If I wasn't talking so much, might have been a little bit faster. So now what your task is to go in and document 4 more pieces of subject matter. You're going to sketch it in with pencil, drawing as closely as you can to the animal or the person or whatever the subject matter is in the piece, drawing it as closely as you can to Romero Britto style. And then remember that for this one, you can go ahead and focus on using the colors that we saw used in Romero Britto's artwork, and don't worry about putting pattern in. These are very small, so putting pattern in would be pretty difficult right now. So I look forward to seeing your final 5 paintings documenting your subject matter, and then it'll be really fun to see what you can do with what you've learned and what you can create using what you've learned.